friend.
Hello, and welcome to Messages and Methods. I am your host, Shelley Carney.
And I'm her co-host, Toby.
That's right.
I'm here for the laughs.
We have a lot of them. Our special guest tonight is, as you can see, Nicole Christina. We'll be talking to Nicole about her amazing work as a podcaster and an author. And we look forward to hearing all about how that came about.
You ready to get the show on the road?
Let's go.
If you are in your 50s or older, we've got something wonderful to share with you. Do you want to produce a live stream, podcast, and blog to quickly expand your brand and business? Or would you like to visit with us, tell us your story and share your message with the world? Experience Messages and Methods live stream podcast with Shelley Carney and Toby Younis. Every week we come together to discuss topics related to encore entrepreneurs, content marketing, live streaming video, podcasting, and blogging. We share stories, experiences, and knowledge to help others in their journey to creating a highly visible online presence. Subscribe today and become a part of our treasured community.
Back to you.
All right. So, good evening, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
My pleasure.
Yay. And I would love to know a little bit about your life prior to becoming a podcaster and author. So why don't you fill us in on that beginning story?
Well, I've been a psychotherapist for 30 years, which is why I have a lot of experience interviewing. There's a lot of similarities, actually, between interviewing guests and interviewing clients. So I have a specialty in eating disorders, and my office is right outside of Syracuse University. And there are a lot of people who need services. So that's been kind of my bread and butter, my mainstay for most of my career. And I started doing some online courses, and I had a tech assistant, and he sort of made this offhanded comment. Little did he know how fast I jump. He said, you'd really be a good podcaster. You should look into it. Well,
Wow.
That was 3.5 years ago. He said it, and the next day I brought my little MacBook Air to a friend of mine's home. She has a very interesting hobby. She's a fly fisherwoman. So she ties her own flies and she goes in the streams. We live near the Great Lakes and also the Finger Lakes. It's very beautiful, easy to get out in nature. And she does work with women recovering from cancer. So she does work, I think it's casting for The Cure. And I was just so really taken by her story. And we actually did a retreat together. And I thought, Vicki will talk to me. She's an easygoing gal. So I grabbed my little laptop, went over to her house, and I asked her about her experiences. She's in her early 60s, and she told me why she is a fly fishing guide, what it does for her, what the history is, what it's like being in a male-dominated field, what it's like catching fish, what it's like being with women in recovery for cancer in these beautiful places on these streams. And I have to tell you, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who said this, but boy, after that interview, I thought, I got to do more of this. It was so satisfying. And, for me as a psychotherapist, it just felt so easy because I wasn't trying to figure out, where do I intervene? What's the diagnosis?
Mm-hmm.
Am I seeing everything? How am I going to help them? Can I help them? All this stuff. It was like, wait a minute, this is the really easy, fun part. And, the rest is history. And I just happen to be the kind of person who, I don't know if it's bravery or just, being a bit foolhardy, but I found that you can contact a lot of people who you might think are out of your league, but if they're putting a book out or a show out or a documentary out, lo and behold, they said, sure, I'll be on your podcast. I'm still taken by the guests that, I've had the absolute honor to interview. Today, I interviewed a woman by the name of Lori Sokol. She's a very big activist, and she's friends with Gloria Steinem and hangs out with Billie Jean King. And, it's really been a remarkable journey. And I think I echo a lot of what other podcasters believe. It's been such an enriching experience for me.
May I mention something before you go to your next question? So there's a pair of books. That one was written in the early 1990s. The other was written in the early 2000s. And the titles of the book are Flywater, and they're about the same subject. But the first one was written by a gentleman, written and photographed by a gentleman who had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he decided he was going to spend the rest of his life, whatever remained of his life, going to some of the best fly fishing spots in the Western states. And he photographed them. He wrote about them. And it turned out to be a beautiful book. I own both of them.
Are you a fly fisherman, Toby?
I am, yeah.
Well, I want to tell you, my son ties, and I'm sure you know what a Clouser minnow is.
I do.
Well, we met Bob Clouser, and he said to my son, who's an adult, these are pretty good Clouser minnows. And that kind of made that, like, that's all he needed to hear. It was, he's like the Beyonce of fly fishing.
Comment.
Oh, we got a comment here. So I won't bore our audience in here to come talk about, but if you get a chance, look them up, because they are or for your lady friend, tell her to find them. Usually you can get them on ebooks, but because they're if you're a fly fisher person.
It's a spiritual thing for many people.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
It's beyond just, and most of the people are catch and release. There's not, we're going to eat these little trout.
No.
That's a whole long story, but they really treat these animals with deep reverence and appreciation.
That's how it is for those of us that do fly fish in New Mexico. It's rare that we don't take them. We take them out of the water. And, we fish with barbless hooks and put them back into the water.
I know all about it.
Well,
more than I ever thought I would. Believe me.
We'll have another conversation on fly
fishing. We will.
Shelley, back to you.
So I have a question. Is you specialize in eating disorders, and yet your podcast is about aging. So how did that come about?
Well, that's a great question. What I was finding is that in addition to eating and body and self-image kinds of issues that people were coming in with, they were aging like I am. My clients are also getting older, and they were talking not only about, I need to lose weight or that kind of stuff, but like, okay, now what do I do? My kids are launching. I have a lot of teachers in my that come to see me, and I'm not exactly sure what that means. I'm sure it's a very stressful job, but they can often retire, at least in New York State, around 55. And so they're saying, I'm looking at retirement. I'm looking at my spouse and saying, I want to go for a hot air balloon ride. I don't want to sit in my recliner watching the History Channel. Are we still compatible? A lot of kinds of questions about what now. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do a really deep dive and really research what makes for zestful aging. Body certainly is part of it. The health, the wellness, all that is in my kind of under the umbrella. But I don't do much about clinical eating disorders particularly. I've given a couple talks about that, but that's certainly not the focus of my podcast. My podcast is talking to people all over the world. We're in 98 countries, and really talking about, what we can do as older people to contribute to the betterment of our world. And we know, and I'm sure leaving a legacy is absolutely scientifically proven to help us feel like, we're aging with some purpose and some vibrance. So it's all really, there's an underlying research. There's an underpinning of good research. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Harvard study of adult development, where they look at what really constitutes good health as we age. But so I sort of meshed it with my social work background and saying, let me talk to some people all over the world who are doing really fascinating things with their lives, and they are over 50.
So you mentioned that the inflection point was the time that you went to interview someone that was interesting to you, and that generated all this other. Prior to that, what was your thinking in terms of podcasting or doing these interviews that would result in podcasts? Had it ever become part of your thinking prior to that time?
Well, like everyone, I was a big fan of Ira Glass. I saw him at Syracuse University. It was incredibly powerful. He started his presentation in the complete pitch dark. And he said, this is how we sound. It's not about how you look. It's about how you sound. That, his art really made an impact on me. But, psychotherapist, I did some online courses, and I wasn't, it was on my radar. But until my tech assistant said, I think you'd really like it, I did some interviewing for a couple courses that I did. And I just have a knack for it because I'm generally really interesting and curious about people. So I don't have to fake it, which is something that I talk about in my book. Only interview people you're interested in, and then you won't have to fake it. So it was on my radar, but I wasn't thinking, hey, I'm a psychotherapist and now I want to be a podcaster. I had done some professional writing, but, I think a lot of people say this, I'm one-on-one mostly with clients. We're talking about issues that I know pertain to so many of us. And I thought, I love my job, but I want a bigger audience. And also I love, thinking about things in a global. My father was a first generation immigrant. I was raised kind of thinking about New York not being the center of the universe. And so, I thought I want to do this globally. I want to know what the people in Sudan think about aging. I want to know about people in Australia. And, what I found, and I don't know what your experience is, but the people I've spoken to in the UK are really quite ahead of us in thinking about the needs of elders and policy and all of this. So I applied to be a speaker at the International Federation of Aging in Toronto. I got accepted. I went, and you know how things kind of snowball. And then one thing led to another. I became a media partner, but it wasn't like, hey, I really want to be a podcaster. It was like, hey, I need a wider audience. I'm working really hard here for just one person to, to benefit from my experience and how much I've researched about this.
Well, I think we agree with you that when it comes to people in our age group attempting to pursue some of these technologies for either, in some of their cases, to build a business because they're using their expertise to develop what we call an encore business, or in the case of the classic example of our Dr. Coffee Brown, who asked us to do a series of shows with him on the coronavirus. And then after that series was done, I think we did 37 of them. He called us back and he said, I'd like to start interviewing people that are doing research in various areas of medicine. And we asked him why. And he said, because I want to leave a legacy.
And this is it. I mean, I say in the introduction to my podcast, I say, contributing, and now I'm not going to remember exactly, but big or small is leaving a legacy. And that is a surefire way to age with vibrance and a deep sense of satisfaction. It's not like when we were 16 and we're like, I got my license. Woohoo. Right. I'm going to the prom with Johnny or whatever. It's more of a quiet, deep satisfaction, like I'm contributing and I'm hopefully leaving things better than I found them. There's a lot of work to be done. And if I can provide a platform and a showcase for people who are doing beautiful work, that's what I want to do. I want to be a conduit
And I think having a purpose, and this is more than just my opinion, it's my opinion based on how I feel at my age. Having a purpose is one of the elements of maintaining, I don't want to say, I think I'm hesitant to call it a youthful lifestyle, but certainly an active lifestyle. It generates a lot of interest, being interested in various things. So I think you're on the right track.
Absolutely. No, I totally, you have to have a reason to get up in the morning. And I think many people have experienced when they retire, if they don't have what you have, they're like, I can only putter around in the garage for so long. I can only have coffee with my friends for so long. And now what? And that's my experience. The research bears that out, is that passion is what keeps us alive, and the curiosity. And I'm kind of childlike, I guess, in some way. I'm still thrilled. And, I'm talking to these people about things that are so near and dear to my heart. And I have to pinch myself sometimes and say, I cannot believe all I have is a laptop, a mic, and a little, Focusrite or whatever, and I get to do this, and we're doing a time okay, you're 9.5 hours ahead. I still, after 250 interviews, I'm still just thrilled to be able to do it.
It's a wonderful, and healthy and nurturing experience from what we've learned. Shelley, back to you.
So I listened to a couple of your episodes today, and you mentioned it in your talk just a few minutes ago as well. And it was something that was visual and stuck with me, is the wife wanting to do something in her retirement years, or, 55 plus. And the husband saying, I'm retired. I just want to sit here and watch my History Channel.
Yes.
And it reminds me of my husband. He went to our financial advisor, who we had on our show a few weeks back, Peter Leifer. And Peter said to my husband, so what is your encore career? What's your next act? What are you doing next? And my husband was just like, what are you talking about? I'm just going to lay around in the hammock and read a book. And Peter was like, no, you have to have a purpose. You need to have a plan, or you're just going to die. That's what happens to people. They don't have a purpose, a reason to get up in the morning, a reason to push and move forward with their lives, a reason to get up and walk around and do stuff. They just die. They've got nothing.
They shrivel up. I mean, I feel like at 60,
how do we tell our husbands, get up out of that chair, stop watching the History Channels, do some stuff?
Well, now you're going to tap into my psychotherapy brain. I mean, this is tricky, right? I mean, I have things I'd love to change about my husband, and it hasn't worked yet. He doesn't, he likes wearing old holy clothes out to the grocery store. As much as I say, can you put something on that doesn't have garden, soil on it? I think that's really tricky. And I guess my sense of it is that you do your thing, you go, and I'm a tennis player. My friends are my age. We love playing. We play hard, but we're not going to go to the US Open anytime soon, right? Mm-hmm. But those are my people, and it just keeps me, it's even hard to put into words. And you do that, and you whatever it is that you love to do, it doesn't matter. It could be knitting group, it could be, surfboarding, whatever you want. And then I think, your spouse watches you, and you're coming home, and you're sweaty, and you're happy, and you say, oh, we won in a tie break. And then you have this enthusiasm. And I think that, the hope is that they'd say, that looks a little more interesting. And how much World War II history do I really need to know? And so I think that, you lead by example. But if the person really is not interested in joining you, I mean, many people will say, listen, I want to go to Iceland and there's a group of women going. Is that something you'd like to do, or should I pursue it myself? And hopefully, you get some interest going. If not, then we have something that I'm sure you're familiar with. It's called the gray divorce. And you get to the point where you say, listen, I don't want to do what you're doing, and there's not enough left after we've raised the kids or and so then this is, as you know, it's a very very common time now for people to split up.
Yeah, it is. So I don't want to break this the questioning at all, but we've had someone in the room ask, may I get the podcast name? This sounds intriguing and would like to listen more, but 3:30 a.m. comes early. That's one of our viewers that's on the East Coast and starts their work at 4:00 in the morning. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go to your website and then just tell us a little bit about where people can find the podcast and the name, where they can find it, things like that.
Absolutely.
And then we'll come back to the Q&A.
Sure. Zestful Aging. You can find it at zestfulaging.com. It's on iTunes and all the platforms. And I really say this sincerely. I love getting feedback. I love getting feedback from my listeners, good, bad, or indifferent. Tell me what you want to hear. I mean, I have my own ideas about what's interesting. They may not match everyone's. There's me playing tennis. That's actually Jilly Smith. She's a woman who founded Anne Frank UK in England and has been all over the world. She's worked with Angelina Jolie in trying to bring acceptance tolerance to the world. That's me on my rebounder. There's my dog Sparky. He's actually right underneath me. I'm getting ready for the New York Empire games there. And I've also written a book. We can talk about that later about podcast interviewing. Yep. So, I'm easy to find, Zestful Aging. And I'd love to hear your feedback. Please let me know what's important to you, what you'd like to learn about, what you'd like to hear about. And I would appreciate that.
So it looks like for those of you that are interested, you can listen to her most recent podcasts on her zestfulaging.com website, but also you can see she's on Google, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, Heart Radio, all the major podcast distributors or hosts rather, and you can download it from there and listen as well. I've started listening to her podcasts while I'm driving. So,
thank you.
Shelley,
I appreciate that.
My pleasure. Glad that I could. Shelley, back to you.
So while we were on the topic anyway, let's get into your book. What is your book about? What made you decide to write the book? And, what was the experience like?
Oh boy, those are a lot of questions. The book is called Not Just Chatting, How to Become a Master Podcast Interviewer. And, this is going to be a little bit different than maybe you've heard before. I have a son on the spectrum, he's Asperger's. And I think for parents who have special needs kids, they know it's a really long haul. It's very difficult. It's very draining. And I think writing the book really helped me feel like, there was a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I worked at it. I thought about it. I edited it. I hired an editor. I hired a book coach. And it just kept like every single thing, all the time and energy really added up to something tangible that I could actually, feel in my hands. And I think, certainly with 30 years experience as a psychotherapist, I think I have a lot to say on the subject of good interviewing. And I've heard a lot of interviewers that I think with a little bit of tweaking could be a lot better. So I think that there was a sense of, listen, I'm listening to interviewers and I think they need a little bit of adjusting or thought in some areas. And also it was a really helpful project for me to feel like, I could accomplish something very, very definite, discrete, and kind of counteracting this. When you have a kid with special needs, you just crossing your fingers most of the time.
So tell us a little bit about the book.
Mhm.
If someone were to put your spin, I'm going to purchase it
Mhm.
right after the show.
Thank you.
What can I expect to gain or learn from it?
Right. I mean, I think the thing is, it's one of these things where it's simple, but it's not easy. And I'm going to put myself right in this category. I'm not like know it all and nobody else know. I'm telling you, it is hard to listen. And we all think we're listening. It's like we all think we're funny, right? And sometimes some are more funny than others. But most of us are really, if we're going to be super honest, we're just waiting for the other person to stop talking so that we can insert our words of wisdom. And I think it's something about putting your ego aside. And I tell a story in the book. I went to the Apple store to get my phone, and then they transfer the data, and I don't know if this was pre-COVID, and I thought I should have packed a picnic. I was there forever. And this young guy, a real sweetheart college student, said, I guess he saw on my computer, I'm a podcaster, and he was just beside, you're a podcaster. Oh my God. I want to be a podcaster. Oh my goodness. I want to be a podcaster. And I said, what would you like to podcast about? And he stopped and he said, I don't know. I thought, buddy, it's a medium, right? It's not an end in of itself. And I think many of us go in without a really clear goal.
Mhm.
Who are we reaching? What do we want to do? What are we offering? And who is our audience? And I'm not even just talking about an avatar, but like, what's the purpose of this thing? Who
Mhm.
cares? So I try to use that filter. So there's that. It's like, how do you know you're really listening? What are your goals? What's the main goal? I talk also about the technical aspects. Like, many people have monotone voices, and you can have the most fabulous content. If you talk in a monotone voice, nobody's going to want to hear it. So some of that's technical. I talk about warming up voice. I talk about one of my, it's not really a secret, but one thing I learned as a therapist in training, my supervisor many years ago, oh my gosh, this was like in the early 90s, said to me, the devil is always in the details. And I thought, oh, well, whatever, that's a cliche. But every time I ask a follow-up question from a client, and I think I'm pretty sure I know what they're going to say, I'm almost always wrong. And so people will, they say their stuff, and then many interviewers will just be like, okay, so now tell me about this. And I say, no, don't shift. You're leaving all the money on the table. So one of the things that I do, and now I'm just in the habit of it, is following up. Well, what do you mean by that? Can you say more? Or I'm not sure I understand. Can you rephrase it? And so really drawing this out, because when people come on my show and they've got these canned answers because they've been interviewed 9 million times and they give me the same canned stuff, it is not interesting. It doesn't have emotional content. It's facts. My audience has enough facts. Nobody wants more facts. What we want is an emotional experience. So if I can draw people out, and my husband teases me and he says, oh, did you make your guest cry again? I'm like, I don't do that deliberately. But the idea is to draw, what is it like? What does that mean? What does that say about you? And I try not to be all shrink about it, but they have given me the absolute consistent feedback that the interview was really deeply enjoyable, different. And I just interviewed a journalist, Dana Macy, and I put this up on my little graphic. She said, you're the best interviewer I've ever spoken to, and I take that very seriously. It's because I ask the follow-up, and I say, and I don't let them just give me the superficial.
As we, so there's a couple of things that we're familiar with. We actually, in our course, the first part of the course is having the conversation with the individual about some of the questions you ask. Why are you doing this? What is this about? How much time are you willing to invest? Where do you want to go with it? And then the second thing is the skill. Interviewing is a skill that can be learned.
Absolutely.
You're not born with the interviewing skill. You have to learn it, and everybody can get that opportunity if they give themselves a chance. So,
and what I think is really wonderful, I think you're absolutely right. And I say in the book, what's really great about this is you try this and you're going to get instant results. And so I think that people love that. They don't hop around so much. And I ask them also to look at interviewers that are sort of famous, big people, the Oprahs, the David Lettermans, the Jerry Seinfelds, all of these people. Notice what they do right, and then what you say, wait a minute, what do you do? Why are you shifting gears? You can see that your guest was welling up. You could see that they were touching something deeper. Why are you now going to ask them about their car collection? So it sort of helps them be critical thinkers about the process. The other thing is, and I'm sure you include this, is, and I've had to learn this myself, is to let your personality and your quirks shine through. And that was hard for me at first. I'm still working on it, because as a therapist, we're not about saying, hey, this is who I am, everybody, here's my personal life. That is not seen as professional. So I've had to be careful, but, really kind of letting a little bit hang out there. And some people are going to like it and some people aren't. So
I used to teach a course called Sentient Sales, and part of the underlying principle behind it is the more you ask questions and the more you listen, the more connected that person becomes to you. And the second thing is, the more you allow yourself to be vulnerable in front of that person, the more they become connected. It's just the nature of sentience. So, but I do want to tell you, my heroes in terms of interviewing, and I didn't know it at the time because I used to watch it with my father. I was just a child, but my first hero was Edward R. Murrow.
Wow.
Because he was a master at it. But then I became fascinated with the work of Studs Terkel. And he didn't start he was an engineer. He was a radio engineer. So he didn't start as a great interviewer, but he spent a lifetime becoming one. So Shelley, back to you.
Okay.
I have all these
share, not ask any questions.
No, I'll leave the questions up to you.
Do a little sharing circle. Okay. So Nicole, what other things are you doing right now to expand your online presence and share your book and your knowledge with the world?
Well, I'm speaking at the Independent Podcast Conference in Philadelphia. I'm speaking at other online kind of situations like this one, that are based in different countries. I'm waiting to hear back from a couple of places that I've said, hey, I've got this book. It's kind of unusual. So I've got people reading it. And, I'm sharing it on social. I mean, I'm not trying. Of course, I want a lot of people to read it. I'm going to my local libraries and I'm talking about it. But I have a full-time job as a clinician. I'm also an avid tennis player. I have 4 dogs and I have a kid with some special needs. So, I haven't put 100% of my energies into it. But I am certainly reaching out. And anytime I get anything from podcast people or organizers or anything, and they say, oh, come look at our stuff, I always send something back and I say, listen, I just wrote this book and there's a new, you may know about it. It's a Women's International podcast. It's not exactly an association, but so they're going to be looking at it for me to do some speaking. But, whenever, and I think that's, you guys are the experts at this, but what I do is whenever I have an opportunity and someone has some interest, I say, hey, I wrote this book. Can I send it to you? I'm kind of, I don't know, people tease me a bit, but I just like take the opportunities. And if they don't like it, I mean, I know it's good. I put my heart and soul into it. I paid an editor. I know it's a quality piece. And I guess I feel like, at some point, it will speak for itself. And maybe that's a terrible business plan, but I'm doing what I can. I'm not hiring anybody to promote it, but anytime I have an opportunity, and I talk to certainly, like, for example, today, my interview was with someone who has a huge following on Twitter. She's going to promote it. And I talk to my guests who are, really top in their field many times and make a connection as Toby made. And then they want to help.
So let me go back to Amazon for just a second so I can let folks know what I've done. So I do want to re-mention that the book that Nicole is talking about is the book that she's written called Not Just Chatting, How to Become a Master Podcast Interviewer. It is on Amazon, and I've posted the link to her Amazon book in case you want to purchase it. So, we'll go back. I did have a question, Shelley, but it's going to take you talking for just a second so I can remember what the question was.
I love it.
I claim senior
Why did I come
memory.
in this room, right?
Yeah.
That's right. All right. So we've covered Nicole's life, her career up to becoming a podcaster, and then her podcast, what it's about, and the types of people she enjoys interviewing and how long she's been doing that. And then we've talked about her book, Not Just Chatting, and how she is sharing that with the world and wanting to share her knowledge and in whatever way possible, but mostly through podcasting. And did that spur anything?
The question is, what happens next?
Where do you go from here? Thank you for saying that, because I wanted to kind of slip this in. This is my dream, and I'm putting it out there for people to hear. I want to go on public radio and have a half an hour interview show. And so I have applied to some of my local NPR affiliates, I guess, and I'm being considered for one. But that's what would just, put the icing on the cake is, not have to worry about the tech, have the support of a public radio station, and it would delight me to no end to be able to interview people all over. There is such a need for optimism. And my really true wish is that when I talk to people who it's not, as we know, being an adult is not easy. And if you've reached 50, you have been knocked down, unless you're some kind of statistical anomaly. And the people that I talk to, they have had, recurrent cancer, children, all the stuff that's really hard. And I guess what I'm hoping is that I can illustrate, even after all that, the resilience and then having an encore career, even though there have been struggles, difficulties, all kinds of road bumps that, if you're a grown-up, you have experienced loss and pain and all of that. And so, part of it is to put some kind of positive examples out there of life has been hard at times, but listen to these people who are traveling, who are doing really interesting things, who are writing these books, who are, I'm going to be talking to a woman who's in her 70s, who's walking the Pacific Crest Trail. I mean, just doing really interesting things. And it's not because life is easy and it's so, but because in some ways, because it's been hard. So I wanted to kind of show an example and help people feel some optimism and hope.
I think one of the things about people in our age group is that we've gotten to a point in life where we've had some success, and that's what people see in that. And one of the areas that I thought was interesting was at some point later in her life, I interviewed my mother, who was a successful artist who had taught school, things like that. And I started interviewing her and asking her these questions. And I didn't realize until that time how difficult her life was, how she and her family had to survive through the Depression, how she went through World War II working in around Los Angeles as an aircraft. I didn't know all of those things about her. And I think that's kind of
riveter.
a riveter.
Really?
And,
Wow.
she was literally
Rosie the Riveter.
Rosie the Riveter. Yeah, she was petite, so they used to send her down to the end of the aircraft where the cone was, the rear cone on a B-25
narrow.
Mitchell. It was a B-25 Mitchell bomber, and the tail cone was pointed, but she was small enough to get down there.
That's fascinating.
I had no idea. And this was my mother. I just assumed she had had a great life as being an interesting artist, et cetera. And I think that's what's fun for the interviews that we conduct, and I'm sure for the ones that you conduct, is that you find out things about these people that, although they seem to you outwardly at this point in life as true successes, they do a really good job. And I don't think it's hiding their bumps in the road, as you referred to them earlier. They just don't think about them in that context until you ask them. And then they look at it as, oh yeah, there was a time where I was in a 4-car crash and I was in the hospital for 6.
Right.
And that's when it comes out like, oh, you survived that. And you can see it made them a better person. So
more resilient. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, life can be very brutal. And, I see that with my clients all the time, but I'm trying to promote this idea that, it is not easy at times. And yet, there's a lot of beauty to be had.
So have you heard from She Podcasts? Did they get all their speakers?
I don't know.
So I'm going to send you a link. Shelley and I are going to a podcasting conference in Scottsdale in October. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And it's called She Podcast. It was specifically for women, but I paid the price to get in, and they said, "Okay, we'll let you in." But there was a point. There was a point at which they were looking for speakers.
Yes, I actually applied.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, I have not heard yet, but they have got some real stars, and I'm part of their online community, and they have done a fantastic job growing. And I'm really I just really admire. I think it's Jessica and Elsie. Am I remembering correctly? And they're powerhouses, and they do very different kinds of stuff that I do, but I really admire their tenacity. By the way, I mean, you probably know Jessica has had some very profound tragedy in her life. She talks about it quite openly, which I really appreciate and admire, but I am familiar with it. And I know there's some wonderful speakers.
Well, we are planning to be there. So we get to meet, we hope you get there. We'd love to meet you.
Thank you. You as
in
well.
person.
Yes.
Back to you. You ready?
All right. Any other plans for the future that you wanted to bring up at this time?
Well, on Sunday, I'm going to the New York Empire State Games to play singles tennis, which not a lot of women or men do at 59. Singles isn't really what they want to do. I pay for it the next day, but I love it, so I don't care. So that's coming up this Sunday. As I mentioned, I'm going to do some speaking in the independent Joe Pardo's conference. A lot of people know Super Joe Pardo. And I've got a lot of other things in the works. I've got an application in for a TEDx talk. And, I think just like all of us, we're kind of looking out for things that are great matches. And I'll continue to do what I'm doing. I mean, I know it's really important to set goals and intention, but I think there's also, for me, there's just like this, I'm talking to people and I don't know who they know and
Mhm.
how we're going to connect. And there's also a mystery and a playfulness in it. Like they may, know the host of, they may know Ira Glass for all I know.
Yeah.
So, my hope is that at some point, there'll be a connection. There certainly have been wonderful connections so far, people I never thought that I'd be able to speak with and have ongoing relationships with. So for me, it's a bit of it's just a thrill to say like, oh, I know that they've done this really interesting work with refugees or whatever. But until you talk to them, you never know what
don't know.
else you
Okay.
have in common. Yeah.
Right. Awesome.
All
Okay,
right.
Well, that's, I think, all we have for this evening, but we do appreciate your time and that you came to share your wisdom with us this evening. Nicole, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And we look forward to future conversations. We certainly look forward to seeing you possibly at She Podcasts in October.
Thank you.
All right. So what do we have left this week?
All right. Well, thank you for being here tonight for Messages and Methods. Be here with us tomorrow night for Shelley Carney Live Stream Coach. We're going to talk some more about social audio and how the Encore entrepreneur can take advantage of social audio to connect with people they may want on their podcast or they may want to do business with. So join us tomorrow night, 7:00 for that.
And then next Tuesday, what can people join us? Where can people join us next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday, we're going to be on Clubhouse at 4 p.m. We have our own club called Rewired, Not Retired. So join us there. We're going to be talking about, again, social audio and Clubhouse and how we use it. And we'll be back next week for 3 more live shows.
And also, if you're interested in joining us on our program, Messages and Methods, you're a senior, an Encore entrepreneur, and you'd like to tell your story, go to journey.agkmedia.studio and fill out the application there. There's several videos explaining how we work and what we expect. And just some information about you. Please, we'd love to have you on our show. You can actually, once you're done with the preliminary part, you can actually schedule your show date. So journey.agkmedia.studio. Thank you again. Hang on, let me close this up here. For joining us, Nicole, we really appreciate the conversation. We're glad you took the time to join us, and I'm sure we'll have future conversations.
I hope so.
Thank you for joining us for the AGK Media Studio podcast with Shelley Carney and Toby Younis. Please subscribe, leave a great review, and comment with questions or ideas for future shows. Share our podcast with your family and friends and discover how you can become a creative campaign producer at agkmedia.studio or join our Facebook group, Leveraging Your Content. Check the show notes for links and resources and please come back again next week.